The committee will now come to order. We're coming together at a very important time for the Postal Service, where postal workers just successfully delivered ballot mail during a busy election season and are now ramping up for a peak holiday season. And Postmaster General shared some numbers for the election mail. I think you'll probably talk about in your testimony here today, but certainly a very busy time. And I certainly appreciate Postmaster General Dejoy for being before us here today to answer questions about the Postal Service operations, finances, and its services to the American people every day. One key issue we'll discuss today is the Postal Service's proposed service changes, which are currently under review by the Postal Regulatory Commission. We will continue to examine these plans and their potential impacts on constituents, as well as their implications for Postal Service finances. The Postal Service connects Americans everywhere, delivering critical mail like prescription drugs, Social Security checks, rent payments, small business packages, and the list goes on. Americans rely on the Postal Service every day, so it's critical that we understand its plans for service, operations, and finances. Our last hearing with the Postmaster General was in April, where we discussed the significant nationwide changes the Postal Service has begun making to its operational network. These include plans to consolidate facilities and reduce truck trips and other changes as to how mail is delivered. These changes will have raised concerns about service quality and cost effectiveness, particularly in rural areas like Iron Mountain Processing Center in my home state of Michigan. At our last hearing and afterward, my colleagues and I urged you to, Postmaster General, to pause and further study these changes before moving forward to fully understand their impacts on the service and cost. As a result, the Postal Service paused a number of facility consolidations until January of 2025. The Postal Service also requested an advisory opinion from its regulator, the Postal Regulatory Commission, to further study these changes. I think this is a positive step to fully understand the impacts through a transparent public process. However, since our last hearing, the Postal Service has also announced new changes, including changes to its service standards, which dictate the speed of mail delivery. Members of Congress, including members of this committee, have continued to raise questions about these changes and about the service impacts. 2 years ago, I led the passage of the Bipartisan Postal Service Reform Act, the first major reforms to the Postal Service in over 15 years. This legislation set the agency on a more stable financial footing, providing over $50 billion in financial relief over 10 years. The Postal Service is not on the brink of financial crisis, but it does need to make careful decisions about how it moves forward. And while the Postal Service is making changes intended to save cost, questions certainly remain about tracking actual cost reductions and the potential for service cuts that also impact the bottom line. Above all, the Postal Service must continue to focus on its public service mandate to deliver to each and every American. And that's why we're here today, to ensure the Postal Service remains accountable to Congress and the American people. The members of this committee and other senators I've heard from are certainly looking for a very open discussion. Mr. Dejoy, thank you. Thank you for being here today, for answering members' questions, and I look forward to a robust discussion. I would now like to turn over the mic to Ranking Member Paul for his opening remarks.
Over 40 years ago, Milton Friedman remarked, if you put the federal government in charge of the Sahara Desert, in 5 years there'd be a shortage of sand. While Friedman was discussing price controls and output restrictions in oil and gas in Dubai, this same logic can be applied to the U.S. Postal Service. In 2020, Congress was promised that a $107 billion bailout would put the post office out of the roll and out of the hole it has been within 3 or 4 years. We were also told that the USPS operations would break even by 2031. Postmaster Dejoy sat in front of our committee in August of that year and stated, I am absolutely convinced that with some help from Congress and our regulator, we can do it and that there is a bright future ahead for the post office. I argued against giving more taxpayer money to the Postal Service, suggesting that private business would be better at managing ongoing costs by making the necessary cuts. Unfortunately, my concerns have proven to be correct. The Postal Service's Delivering for America initiative, the bailout, was expected to yield quick results. However, the Post Office lost $6.5 billion in 2023 and is set to lose $9.5 billion in 2024. That doesn't sound like progress. They were losing $1 billion a quarter. Now they're losing $2 billion a quarter. Only in Washington can someone point to losing $2 billion a quarter as a success. Given the continued financial shortfalls, it is entirely nonsensical for the USPS to convert more than 190,000 service workers into career roles since October 2020. If this were a private business, you'd be doing the opposite. If you were a unionized corporation in one state, what do? They actually move to another state and open a non-unionized in a right-to-work state, and that's how they continue to exist. Corporations don't add to their misery by adding and increasing their labor costs. These career roles, government career roles, effectively allow those workers to make 50% more per hour and create decades of benefits responsibilities that will make breaking even in the future even more difficult. When we had pension problems in Kentucky, we did the opposite. We ended up changing from a pension. We went to a contribution plan, and then we gradually are fixing it. It's still taking a long time because we had the old obligations, but we gradually figured out how to go to a new plan where we wouldn't be stuck with all these pensions. These positions are of insourcing jobs that were provided at lower cost before by private partners, so we're increasing the cost of the post office. During the Postal Service Reform Act, I argued that no funding should be given to USPS without changes to its labor practices and cost. Instead, no labor changes were made, and now Americans are left holding the bag of an ever more bloated Postal Service. The Postal Service has tried to explain away these bad numbers due to the costs that USPS cannot control. But the service is spending $9.6 billion on electric delivery vehicles and spending nearly $40 billion over 10 years to convert and build certain facilities into hubs that so far have resulted in worse delivery and services. In order to keep making these infrastructure updates, the Postal Service is asked to raise its $15 billion borrowing limit with the Treasury Department. Hardly sounds like a success. Private sector companies deal with uncontrolled costs all the time, including the same factors USPS faces like inflation, and they find a way to provide for their owners and shareholders. But they don't do it by adding more union employment. USPS would count for the uncontrollable costs in their budget and stop coming to Congress. You know, you guys should try to fix the problems instead of keep coming back and asking for more. This hasn't stopped Congress, though, from throwing even more money at the Postal Service. For those counting, that's $120 billion in funding and relief in the past 4 years alone. While $120 billion is already an astounding number on its own, when you consider the sum relative to our nation's dismal fiscal condition, it suddenly becomes reckless. We're over $36 trillion in debt. It's time to do something different. What we're not seeing is anything different at the post office, and I, for one, say it's about time we have some reform.
Thank you, Ranking Member Paul. It is the practice of this committee to swear in witnesses, so Mr. Dejoy, if you'd please stand and raise your right hand. You swear that the testimony you will give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Thank you. You may be seated, and you're recognized for your opening remarks.
Good morning, Chairman Peters, Ranking Member Paul, and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to once again discuss the significant progress that the U.S. Postal Service is making in accomplishing the objectives identified in the Delivering for America plan. When I agreed to take the role as Postmaster General, the nation was at the beginning of a pandemic, and the Postal Service was an organization in crisis, facing a diverse array of challenges that put the organization on a near-term trajectory to financial and service collapse. The Postal Service had lost almost $90 billion, was projected to lose another $200 billion over the next 10 years, and was about to run out of cash before year end. Our over 31,000 facilities were in shocking, horrible condition, with over $20 billion in deferred maintenance and ill-equipped for modern-day tasks. We had not met our service standards in almost 10 years, and had not reduced work hours in over 8 years, despite significantly reduced volume. We had billions of dollars of self-inflicted wounds from poorly evolved packaged products and had an organization and operational strategy that had long ago become dysfunctional. More explicitly, over 57% of our 31,000 post offices did not cover the cost of the people that worked at them, and 76% of our 235,817 delivery routes lost money. We ran 55,000 trucks a day, 70% empty, and had 4 different networks operating at significantly low utilization, wasting billions of dollars. This all came to a head in the peak season of 2021 when we were overwhelmed and dramatically impacted service throughout the nation for many months. This was the dreadful condition and trajectory of the Postal Service prior to the DFA, and there was no plan anywhere to do anything about it. The DFA plan has 5 simple directional objectives to be accomplished in consideration with the laws and regulations that govern the Postal Service today, and the relevant attributes of our evolving economy, environment, geography, marketplace, and competitive landscape. These objectives are to improve our operational precision and organizational effectiveness, to reduce our cost of performance, to create reliable and affordable service, to grow our revenue and margin on our products, to create productive and long-term careers for our employees. These initiatives and the commitment to this transformation has been embraced by our whole organization, and the pace of change and accomplishments are impressive. We are a different organization today, and I'm impressed by the talent and tenacity of our people as they work hard to make the Postal Service the best in commerce and public service for many years to come, a unique opportunity we have, and as the Congress intended when they created us. However, times have changed, and so has what it takes to be that entity that Congress intended. And while we have accomplished a great deal, we are at the beginning of an ongoing journey to evolve with the nation rather than lag behind. In the past, the inability and unwillingness to make the necessary changes when required is what had caused the condition and trajectory of the organization when I arrived here. To understand the full picture that the advisory opinion contemplates and solves, I refer you to my written testimony. However, in summary, we have prepared a comprehensive proposal that has been responsive to hundreds of questions asked of us by the PRC and other parties. Let me share some key points as a foundation to help set aside the fears and misunderstandings that seem to surround the PRC advisory opinion. The changes we propose are to the collection, not the delivery of mail. In fact, we expect delivery times for most mail to improve. Your constituents receive far more delivered mail than they send, and to further isolate the impact of our proposed change, it is primarily single-piece first-class mail to which we propose to modify the collection schedule and only by a matter of hours. In the last 25 years, the volume of first-class single-piece mail has plummeted from 57 billion pieces to 12 billion. Yet the chaotic, costly, and illogical network we have been laboring under was originally designed for mail, but now must be redesigned to include the increased package volume and redesigned to include the increased package volume over an integrated network. The survival of mail and the Postal Service itself depends on successfully navigating this irreversible volume shift. Although the proposal analyzes volume and distance to propose schedule changes in the collection of single-piece mail, it is not a proposal that primarily impacts rural communities. The savings and operational efficiencies achieved here are substantial, and I assure you are necessary to preserve the universal service obligation. The very mandate that policymakers fear is being called into question is what we are in fact saving. Please note that any service adjustments fall within the existing 2- and 5-day service standards, and that the proposal introduces standards that are relatable to our customers and that they will be based on the 5-digit zip codes we are familiar with. The changes proposed create from a network of massive chaos and redundancy an integrated mail and package network as required by the recent postal reform legislation, thereby correcting for poor operating practices and enabling us to compete for new revenues and survive. In addition, the letter of invitation I received for this hearing requested that we also discuss transparency and accountability responsibilities we shoulder. In my written testimony, I've detailed for you heavy transparency, regulatory, and accountability burden under which we labor. It is detailed in testimony and the weighty attachment that reminds the reader that we are not a typical government agency. We are a self-financed and independent establishment of the executive branch. We must operate in many ways like a private business, as we have, and we have many competitors. We also have many layers of regulation and oversight that would cripple a private company that also had our scope and our public policy mandates. This has significance as it has paralyzed the Postal Service of the past and a contributing reason why we are in the predicament we are in. Relatedly, I share testimony and attachment that details our unfunded mandates as essential and justified as our universal service obligation is. It comes at a very high cost that needs to be reckoned with at the same time as mail and package volume shift, delivery points steadily increase, costs climb, and pressures not to change a single thing about our service persist. I welcome the opportunity to educate the committee on our plans to move the organization forward. I welcome you on that journey. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Mr. General, in September, I asked for your commitment to report to this committee on how the Postal Service has substantially and substantively considered the Postal Regulatory Commission's input on national changes that are going to be made to the network and to service standards. You committed at that time to provide comprehensive responses to any PRC recommendations. But I'd just like to follow up on that, if I may, sir. Will you provide this committee with a copy of your comprehensive response to each of the PRC's recommendations when they come out? Yes or no?
I don't see why, unless there's some regulatory reason or not to. We will submit our responses to the Postal Regulatory Commission, and I think I'm happy to send you a copy of our responses.
So you'll provide that to us?
Yeah.
Appreciate it. For each PRC recommendation, you will provide a detailed explanation as to whether USPS will implement the recommendations as well?
We will answer the responses comprehensively. So, to the extent...
Including, as to the degree you will implement or not.
I'm sorry?
Including the degree to which you're going to implement or not implement going forward.
So there's a specific way that we go about answering questions in the reg that our legal department deals with, but from the standpoint of the organization as a whole, whether we submit it in that or we announce publicly what we're going to do at the same time, there will be full disclosure and transparency as to what we're going to do, what we're actually going to do.
Okay, very good. The Postal Service is required to provide, quote, prompt, reliable, and efficient service to all communities, as you're well aware. That includes rural areas. Rural Americans, like my constituents in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, rely on the Postal Service to promptly deliver Social Security checks, rent payments, all sorts of critical mail. And the Postal Service has announced service standard changes that would significantly impact rural mail. Based on the numbers the Postal Service has filed with the PRC, your plan is to slow down 68% of single-piece first-class mail in rural areas, and that compares to 34% in urban areas. You would slow down roughly 15% of rural mail and upgrade only about 3% of it. These are necessary deliveries for these communities. It would come late. So my question for you, sir, is how does this slowdown of rural mail, if implemented, comply with the Postal Service's obligation to provide service and prompt service to all communities?
So I'm not familiar with those numbers that you cite. First off, delivery of mail to rural areas and to all areas will not change, and in many cases, in a few cases, about 10 or 15% will in fact improve. Delivery is not being affected. Okay, we are talking about the collection process of single-piece first-class mail only, right? Single-piece first-class mail was 59 billion pieces 20 years ago, 23 years ago. It's down to 12 billion pieces now, and we run the same collection processes for single-piece first-class mail that drive significant cost and take up a significant amount of time in moving the overwhelming amount of volume that moves through the system. So I'm not anticipating on the delivery side, I'm not anticipating any slow. I'm anticipating improvement in the delivery times, because most mail originates within the 50-mile radius of the operations we're talking about, and it's the collection of single-piece mail going out of these areas that could be slowed down somewhere between 12 and 24 hours.
Plans to reduce truck trips in areas across the country, collecting mail less often from outlying facilities and therefore reducing services. You tested this initiative in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and my constituents have now reported delays to important mail, like insurance claims, rent checks, the list goes on. There have also been delayed prescriptions, where extra days certainly matter. And cities that were sending some samples to the EPA as a result of water testing, it requires quick turnaround. They can no longer do that because they can't rely on the Postal Service to get that mail to them on time. The USPS has said that this transportation optimization was a pilot, but my question for you is, are you planning to make that permanent up in the UP?
We're planning, so that was an initiative called Local Transportation Optimization. We rolled that out in 12 locations around the nation. Whether service, the incidents that you were speaking about consequences were related to that change or not, I cannot comment on, because there are other reasons why service fails or why expectations are not met. In terms of the changing environment, there are a lot of places where we exceed in service, and part of the rationalization of the network is to meet the standard. But LTO, we went back and looked at it, and it was not consequential enough and executable enough to get the amount of cost savings that we needed, and we've changed to the more regional approach that we're taking, going forward. And that's in our filing. So the concept is the same. The area is just bigger that we're going to deal with.
When the Postal Service released its strategic plan in 2021, it called for postal reform, which was completed. It also called for executive actions to change how the Office of Personnel Management calculates Postal Service pension obligations. I sent a letter to the White House pushing for this change, and OPM simply uses outdated accounting rules for postal employees, as you know, compared to other employees. And that puts extra cost onto the Postal Service. This could be changed, and I believe could save billions of dollars while also saving pensions. So my question for you, sir, is are you still in favor of making this administrative change? And could you explain to this committee why that would be important?
So there's two areas of our pension that we are interested. One is the CSRS reallocation, when we were separated as an independent agency, from the federal government. We have calculated a significant shifting of the federal government's burden for its retirees at the time onto our balance sheet. And we have, and this is one of the things you helped us with, trying to, writing to get actually executive action to make that change, which the Office of Legal Counsel has said that that requires legislative change instead of executive change. So, but yes, we do feel the calculations show that we were overburdened when we separated from the from the government. There are other things within our retirement plan. I expect to have 610,000 people next year in our organization, and I'll have 710,000 people on my retirement plan. There are things within our investment structure that are killers, to us. This is public. This is this is enterprise services money that we have aggregated and put into the into the foundation. We have to invest it as with the federal government, and we don't get the we don't get the returns like a TVA or an Amtrak. That's one of the other things that we're looking to do. And then there's some other subtle magic that OPM does with their calculations that are punitive to us relative to the age group, the age calculations that they use for for us and so forth. It is a huge issue. It was 80% of our loss this year. In my projections to break even over the last 3 years, we had an additional $10 billion of bills from the federal government on our on our retirement plan that we were not expecting, and were well above the projections in the thing. It's no different than any major corporation that found themselves in these particular constraints when they had defined benefit plans. However, in some cases, they were able to raise their prices and so on and so forth, or do their investments so it concurs with the changing marketplace. We had nothing available to us. We could not raise our prices effectively for the changes in the economy, and we could not rationally put investments with regard to meet that obligation. So it is an obligation that will continue to be detrimental to the survival of the organization.
Thank you. Ranking Member Paul, recognized for your questions.
You mentioned in your testimony that the post office is different than other areas of government, that it has to operate like a private business. You also mentioned that about 80% of the volume of first-class mail has gone down over time. Can you think of a private business where 80% of what they're, doing to make money is going down in volume that would actually increase their employees?
Yeah, so, Senator, you keep asking. I mean, I didn't make the laws that organize the United States Postal Service, okay? I came in, as I said, to the condition that we had, and I'm trying to fix it. Now, you exaggerate the hiring aspects. I am 20,000 people less in employment today than when I walked in the door. Okay, I burned 50 million less work hours over last year than we did the year I walked in the door.
Is there more or less work being done by contractors versus government employees?
Well, that's a good point. I was a contractor in that industry, and again, I walk into the situation I had. The contractors that we had and the contracts that we had and the locations that we had were detrimental to the organization. So I had 2 points to get cost out. Do I shut down all my operations where all my people are, or do I bring in these contracting operations? I have changed huge contracts, from our priority mail system.
But I know of no one in private practice or investors who, give advice through a corporate board who would say, you have a declining business model, we're going to increase the numbers, but then when you have a choice of hiring contractors that won't be paid the same wages or pension benefits or health care benefits that you pay your employees, you're up 190,000. You've insourced 190,000 jobs. And it's just sort of inexplicable. The whole point of the reform of shifting the cost, it's not really reform, it's a shell game. We just took a bunch of things that are still costs on your books and we put them on somebody else's books somewhere else in government. It's still a massive cluster in a way that the debt problem is just shifted over to another account. But in doing that, the main thing you were trying to get away from was healthcare costs and pension, right? And so if you compare a contractor or a contracted employee to a government employee, an insourced employee, and you compare the health costs and the pension costs, they're dramatically higher for insourced. So by increasing your number of people who work for the government as opposed to contractors, you're compounding the same problem. You were here with us 3 years ago saying, we can't handle all these other expenses. We need to shift them somewhere else. And so the reform package did that. But in contrast, then you could continue to hire more people instead of saying, well, we have all these extra costs associated with government labor. Why don't we hire labor outside of the government and use contractors?
So in isolation on one element of the issue, which you seem to be focused on, perhaps you're right. okay? But I've come out of industry. I've been on boards. I've built an organization in this similar space with 20,000 people, worked in an organization with 100,000 people, okay? And have walked into a situation that had varying activities going on inefficiently across its operation.
But I would argue you
Okay?
would have treated your own
I have not
business
converted
differently.
140,000 people to full-time
Your business was successful, though, not by doing the decisions you're making now. This wouldn't have helped the private businesses as it helping the post
decisions
office.
within the environment I have. If I change a collection box time on a blue box, I have the rage of Congress bearing down on me. Okay, so there are trade-offs that one has to make in this step. At the end of the day, we have requirements to have about 20% of our workforce be pre-career, 80% of our workforce
You're
be.
delivering less mail, you need a smaller organization, not a
We're
bigger
actually
one.
growing in the package business. The objective here is to create an integrated mail and package network. An integrated mail and package network means less places, less contracted places, less of our own places, and putting people.
It's hard to point towards success when the debt last year was $6.5 billion and this year's $9.5 billion. That doesn't look like success under any sort of metric. That looks like it's getting worse.
If we spend.
And the reason why labor is an important part of this is it's estimated that the labor is 80% of the cost of doing business for the post office. For UPS, which is unionized, but a private union versus a government union, it's about 50%. For FedEx, who's non-unionized, the cost of labor to the business is about 38%. So there are cost savings by being outside of government unions, frankly. Even private unions have some cost savings. But when we have a hole and we see a problem, we try to change it. Like, we have a pension problem in Kentucky. So we just simply said the new hires would not be in the pension system or get a different deal. We understood that the previous hires would have to get their pension. The new people would come under a new contract, and we'll dig our way out of the hole, and it's going to take us 20, 25 years to dig our way out of it. But we began doing it by actually offering defined contribution as opposed to defined benefit. You sort of did this and shifted the cost, but now we're getting more people. We're getting more government workers, and that's where the problem originated, was too many benefits to government workers.
Now, I don't know that I agree, again, with that premise, that's where the problem originally, the problem.
Is labor still about 80% of your cost? Is labor still 80% of the cost
We're
of doing
still
business?
80% of our cost. So we have a plan to try and make labor, to make the labor cost that we have work, okay? And that means to create an integrated operation, okay? We have 500 different locations around the organization that we were processing mail, including our contractors. I'm trying to get down to 200.
Do you have
Right?
the
I'm trying to
ability to hire new people under either a different pension or a different healthcare system, or do you have the ability to hire new workers for the government under a different pension or different healthcare arrangement than the previous? You had
I
to
do
hire
have
them
the
under,
ability
it's
to
a deal,
hire.
the union commands what the structure is, and you have to stay the same, right?
Well, the Senate and the House and administrations, when forming the United States Postal Service, made these rules that we have.
You're exactly
I did
right.
not.
You're exactly right. And then when we looked at the reform, that was my suggestion, is if labor is 80% of your cost, you have to do something about your labor cost. Either outsource it, or what you need to do is provide a different alternative through pension or through health care. But we didn't do any of that. All we did was the shell game of taking all your
I
costs and
disagree.
sticking it
I
somewhere
disagree.
else.
How about we stop processing 20 million packages a day by hand? All right, how about we bought some conveyors? Okay.
How about you show us some cost savings?
We saved $2.5 billion in costs and $1.4 billion
The
in
debt went from
transportation.
6.5 to 9.5.
That's right. We had 20% inflation and I had fixed prices.
So did everybody else, but not everybody else in the private marketplace treating their business like a private entity lost an extra $3 billion. So it just isn't a success story, and it's not your fault.
what would you like me to
It's
do?
not all,
What
I'm
would
not
you like me to
blaming
do?
it all on you, but you're constrained by things. But to say it's not a problem, I think is not to be, just not to be honest with
I have never
yourself or
said
with
it's
everybody
not a
else.
problem. I've never
Well, it's
said
a
it's not a
huge
problem. I'm trying to
problem,
find
and
a fix, a
it's a
direction.
huge problem. and it's the way government works. And government just doesn't work very well, so we should try to minimize government. One way to minimize government is not to hire more government workers. Make government smaller, hire private workers, because private workers are more subject to the marketplace. And you would say to a private worker, we can't keep offering the same pension we've done for 40 years. We can't offer the same health care that we've done for the last 40 years. I don't think we're doing enough. I think we're going in the wrong direction.
My goal is to get the Postal Service workers to operate productively and efficiently, okay? And that's by giving them the tools and the facilities and the processes and the inspiration to move forward, okay? And from the standpoint of service and cost effectiveness of the labor dollar, I think there is much improvement that we have made and much improvement that we can get to. There are other burdens around the organization that I agree with you are a tough hill to climb, okay? But the operational aspects and the growth aspects of the organization, the competitive aspects that it could have deployed 20 years ago, are what we're trying to do now. And while you are all messing around with what the legislation should be, I'm trying to deliver mail-in packages cost-effective in the best way possible, like a private industry would, like a UPS would. That's what I have an expertise in, and that is what my target is operationally and growth-wise, is that the Postal Service should act like UPS and FedEx. With regard to all these other things that you all share responsibility in, okay? I'm happy to work with you, like I worked with you, Senator Peters, on getting the Postal Reform Act passed. I'm happy to do that. Let's do it. Okay, but right now, I know what I'm doing with regard to consolidating the organization, trying to move the organization forward to get work hours out, which we have, to get transportation costs out, which we have, right? And to grow the business, which we have. And we will continue down that path until somebody hauls me out of here.
Senator Carper, you're recognized for your questions.
Thanks very much, and welcome, Mr. Dejoy. Good to see you. Thank you for your being here. There's several people in the audience behind you that we've worked with in the past. It's nice to see them. One of the quotes, I don't know whose quote this is, but in adversity lies opportunity. In adversity lies opportunity. I'm always, that's one of my guiding principles in life. And the adversity that's faced by the Postal Service, there are opportunities as well, and I think you're trying to seize the day on some of those. There are other, I'll say, competitors to the Postal Service who are in the package business, and they don't deliver mail, but they deliver a lot of packages. And I know you guys are delivering a lot more packages as well. But some of those companies have decided over the last 5-10 years that they want to phase out their diesel engines and their gasoline engines, and but have mail delivered in vehicles that do not create carbon dioxide or greenhouse gases. They've done, and they didn't make that conversion. Those companies didn't make the conversion because they're somehow concerned about the planet burning up, and because of environmental concerns. They did it because they felt that they could actually. There's an economic argument. They thought that they could do this, deliver their products in a more cost-effective way. I think when we passed the big postal bill a year or two ago, a couple of years ago, we tried to provide some money for the Postal Service to, as your vehicles are very old, and as you're making that transformation and modernizing your fleet, to make sure you're buying some vehicles that could be hybrids, they could be electric vehicles. To save money, and not just because it was the right thing. You're being good environmental stewards. Could you give us an update, please, on the rollout of postal vehicle hybrids, electric vehicles, and some of the challenges you've encountered? And how is the Postal Service finding this transition, both on the economic side and on the environmental side?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. So as you said, we have over 220,000 vehicles that are over 30 years old, long exceeded their useful life. were burning up on the street when I got here. We have committed both to ICE vehicles and electric vehicles, 106,000 vehicles that will be bringing into the system over the next 4 years, of which 66,000 of them will be electric vehicles. So far to date, we have acquired, coming in this year, we'll have about 10,000 electric vehicles coming. Now, there's two sides of that. There's the vehicle itself. We have unique requirements because most of our vehicles have to be right-hand drive as opposed to left, so we can't go commercial off the shelf for many. So we bought 10,000, Ford Transits that are coming in, and next year we'll start receiving a high volume of our next generation delivery vehicle, which is the right-hand side vehicle. And most of those will be electric vehicles over the rest of the years. There's two sides to that. We have to build out the electric vehicle infrastructure, which is a big and long, multi-year project. And there's imbalances right now in terms of getting the commercial off-the-shelf vehicles that are specifically left-hand drive into the system. But we should be through that in the within the next 8 to 12 months to have those deployed. But we are moving forward, in a pretty good pace. We got the President's Sustainability Award for rollout of electric vehicles. We are now looking at, when originally we looked at a 1-for-1 charging station to vehicle relationship. We're looking to expand that. We're finding some of our routes can go 2 or 3 days without being recharged. And we're putting that into the model, and that's going to help accelerate the deployment. We're looking at clustering around some of our larger delivery units, where we have 200 and 300 charging stations for vehicles there. Doing alternate days where we have the ability to do that. So the team knew absolutely nothing about, including myself, about electric vehicles when we got here. I think we're pretty formidable, and we'll rise on that. And the other thing, I do think that in my work here and in the other environmental things that we've gone through, I do think there is I think the statistics back 20% of the people order how their packages get delivered based on the environment, and we expect that to grow, and we want to be the preferred supplier in the package delivery business for a certain size package for a certain distance. And we're paying attention to that in our marketing and in terms of our deployments.
Good for you.
Yeah, I think
I'm going to have to cut you off just for a moment here. Vote by mail.
Yeah.
Are we?
Can I add one other thing?
No.
Really
I'm running out of time. I'm sorry. Thank you for your responses, and thank you for your commitment to actually doing the right thing, but also the economically smart thing. The other question I want to quickly ask: we've just come out of an election season, as we know, and people all over the country have been voting for federal, state, local candidates or against them. As it turns out, a lot of people voting by mail. And they're finding that they like it. In fact, the majority, I think a clear majority of people don't vote in person anymore. And what kind of opportunities is this provided for the Postal Service? And have we seized the day to take advantage of that?
So I didn't hear the last part. Have we done what?
Yeah, how has the Postal Service seized the day? What the voters are looking for are easy ways. They want to vote, but they don't want to go stand in line, and the Postal Service can help with that. How are we doing in that regard?
So it's an interesting, we, first of all, we perform well. We've just put out our report with 99.8% of the ballots getting, within 7 days, so on and so forth. It was less than in 2020. The voting was less than in 2020. I would say that there are opportunities to make this better, right? We have, we get to a point where where two things can be correct. We deliver 99% of the ballots on time, and you still find 1,000 ballots someplace that didn't make it. And that becomes that's a big issue. And it's not necessarily because of the Postal Service. It could be, but there's 8,000 different voting districts across the nation, across 50 states, with different rules and different types of mail pieces and different requirements. We don't count, we don't say when the vote has to be in, if it gets counted and all that. And that creates a lot of ugly conversation, between, our organization and state secretaries of state and so forth. Simple accusations of something being laid on the mail process creates, this, a lot of emotion. So I think long-term, we did an excellent job. It was a big, effort on us. I think a standard, mail piece would be helpful to us long-term. We're looking at ways to work with the different states, the different election offices to get into a specific contract type of basis to do that. But yes, vote by mail is here to stay. We've done a good job. Election officials have done a good job, but it's still not where it needs to be because if we want 100% guaranteed performance, we need to do more together.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Senator Hassan, recognized for your questions.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank you and the ranking member for holding this hearing. Welcome, Postmaster General. It is good to see you. I want to focus a bit on the ways that you can work to strengthen mail service, and I want to also share my concerns about some of the proposals that you have that would make mail service worse in my state for Granite Staters. The Postal Service has a plan to move some postal operations from Manchester, New Hampshire to Boston. I oppose the plan because implementation of it will harm service and delay delivery. I also oppose moving operations from White River Junction, Vermont to Hartford, Connecticut, because White River Junction serves Granite Staters in the northern part of New Hampshire. We know from Postal Service Inspector General reports that processing center consolidations like the ones you're considering here, including those in Virginia and Georgia, resulted in, quote, an immediate and significant decline in service performance, close quote. And we know, too, that those declines continued for several months and that these facilities are still struggling to meet their on-time delivery goals. I have also repeatedly heard serious concerns from postal employees and customers that your plans would slow delivery service in New Hampshire. And just to be clear, taking a collection center, a processing center from Manchester to Boston moves at least a 2-hour drive time, both from the collection point into the processing center and then back up to New Hampshire. Despite pausing your Manchester and White River Junction consolidation plans earlier this year, you haven't sought an independent analysis of how these plans will impact Granite Staters. So yes or no, will you ask the Postal Regulatory Commission to analyze the service impacts of moving operations from Manchester to Boston and White River Junction to Hartford? And if the Postal Regulatory Commission finds that moving operations from Manchester to Boston or White River Junction to Hartford will cause significant disruptions, will you stop the plan from moving forward?
If you're asking me if I would specifically ask the Postal Regulatory Commission to opine on that specific...
To have an independent analysis done.
Would not.
So you won't have that done.
No.
I'm going to continue to strongly oppose the plans, especially in the absence of an independent review of the service impacts in New Hampshire, because common sense and my own familiarity with the whole region tells me that this will slow down service in considerable ways. How are you going to continuously monitor service as operations transition from Manchester to Boston or from White River Junction to Hartford? And if and when delays occur, how are you going to rectify them?
That's a good question, and that is something that we have amped up considerably in terms of operational reviews, performance excellence, GIMBAs on site, and so forth. So I can tell you that we have people looking at every bit of performance in all of these moves now, when we have response teams ready to to jump in and make the necessary corrections.
Well, what if your monitoring tells you that it was a mistake to take it from Manchester to Boston because it's going to delay delivery in considerable ways?
Again, I'm not, a mistake. You may think it's a mistake, and we may not think it's a mistake. A delay, a change in service, and I don't know the specifics. of right now off the top of my head in Manchester. We will have a service standard that is good for the whole nation, and we will meet that service standard.
Well,
Okay?
and because my time is limited, I hear you on that, and I hope you are right, but I believe you aren't. And the reason is, if you slow down collection, if you do collection less frequently, and it takes longer to drive mail from one place to the processing center than it did before, and you're doing less collection, and it's going to take longer to get it back to the state where you need to deliver, my common sense tells me that is going to delay service. Let me move on to another issue.
I think you're double counting some of that time.
Well, since I'm really familiar with the drives, and I'm pretty familiar with the terrain, and I'm listening to my postal employees a lot because they're really smart people and they're familiar with it too. And I would suggest you might want to talk with them. But let me move
talk with
on
my
to
employees all the
Mr.
time.
Dejoy. We have limited time. And so I'm going to move on to my next question. While you have focused on making large-scale operational changes, some smaller changes and investment in technology can have significant and positive impacts because they will improve employee safety, they will boost morale, and they will improve customer service. There are two incidents that I want to highlight that demonstrate the need for common sense investments by the service in technology. First, earlier this year, a Nashua, New Hampshire letter carrier was robbed at gunpoint while delivering mail. Thankfully, he was unharmed, but the robbers stole his arrow keys, which are used to access mail collection boxes. Then they used the keys to steal the mail. In response to the rise in attacks on postal employees, letter carriers have called for converting arrow keys to electronic fobs, which could be disabled in the event that the fobs are stolen, preventing further crimes and disincentivizing criminals from stealing them in the first place. So that's one incident. The second incident occurred in Hanover, New Hampshire, where the local post office didn't have access to Wi-Fi for 2 months earlier this year, meaning that the post office was unable to process credit cards to perform basic transactions. As we all know, having reliable internet access is essential for operating a business in this day and age. So will you commit to making common sense investments to improve employee safety and customer service as part of the Delivering for America plan?
The Delivering for America plan is all about making investments in our facilities and modernizing the network, so yes.
Thank you. These are things that letter carriers and other employees have raised, and we've had to push really hard, for instance, on the Wi-Fi issue. So I would look forward to working with you on that. I only have a little bit of time left, but I do want to just raise one more issue. My office regularly receives outreach from constituents asking for our help in resolving the postal issues they're facing. For example, for more than 7 years, a small business owner in Peterborough, New Hampshire, was able to reliably schedule package pickups from her home nearly every day, whether it was 1 package or 30, whether it was rainy or sunny. After her regular mail carrier retired in 2023, the daily pickups became less reliable, and some days they were missed altogether. We hear stories like this all the time, frustrated customers and small business owners who are looking for reliable, consistent service. And when we reach out to our Postal Service customer liaisons or regional management seeking help, we are often met with excuses instead of action, and that's obviously not acceptable. So will you commit to ensuring that your regional management takes a more active role in working with us to resolve issues brought to us by our constituents?
Yeah, I think we do need some work in that area, Senator, and we have aggressively pursuing that.
Well, I appreciate that. I'll also just add that a number of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle have felt that sometimes your office's response is lacking when we make inquiries, so I hope very much that we can work on improving that as well. Thank you.
Sure.
Senator Blumenthal, you're recognized for your questions.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for having this hearing. Thank you, Mr. Dejoy, for being here today. When you were last here in April, you and I talked a little bit about Ridgefield, Connecticut, small town, but important to me and the people of Connecticut, along with other towns where the United States Postal Service has property that is essentially unused and where, in fact, the Postal Service could save some money. Maybe not billions of dollars, but every penny saved, as you know from your business experience, is important to a corporation. When we spoke in April, you promised to look into the Ridgefield property personally, but all you did afterward was cite a September 2023 letter from one of your government relations people, Scott Slusher. Is he still with you?
Yes.
Is he here today?
There, yeah.
Good morning, Mr. Slusher. Mr. Slusher told me in that letter, quote, during our peak holiday season when mail and package volumes dramatically increase, the lot will be needed to accommodate the foreseeable needs of our customers and the additional seasonal employees we employ to meet those needs. When was the last time, Mr. Dejoy, you visited Ridgefield, Connecticut?
I don't know that I've ever been to Ridgefield,
You've
Connecticut.
never been there.
No.
Has Mr. Slusher ever visited? I take it from your non-answer that he hasn't.
You're asking me if I don't keep up with the travel.
You don't know? No.
No.
Let me show you a photo of that lot. Last December, December 27th, during the peak holiday season. It's empty. It's empty every day in December. It's empty every day during the year. That lot is unused. The small businesses on Main Street want to make that lot available for parking. They don't want to take anything away from the United States Postal Service. And the non-responsiveness, I'm tempted to say stonewalling, of the Postal Service in response to their and my request, the town of Ridgefield, so that that property can be used for parking, enabling more customers for those small businesses on Main Street, I think is really unacceptable. Will you come to Ridgefield?
Sure.
We'll set it up with your office during the peak holiday season.
I make trips.
You'll love
People invite
Ridgefield.
me, I'll come to Ridgefield.
It's especially beautiful in the peak
Let me-
holiday
let-
season.
let-
And while you're in Ridgefield, maybe we could also visit Milford, Norwalk, East Hartford, where there are properties that could be sold by the Postal Service. They're essentially unused. Postal Service could make some money.
Yeah.
And right now, it is essentially refusing even to respond as you have done essentially on Ridgefield.
So, first of all, I'll take the whole tour. All right, I'll come up. But we are in a process, we have these requests throughout the whole nation, and we are in a process of looking at 31,000 facilities across the nation, trying to determine what we're going to stay in and not stay in, where we're going to park electric vehicles, where, you know, and so forth. So we are in a status of evaluation. Okay, we will get through this as we work through our whole network, where our sorting and delivery centers are going to be, what our retail configuration is going to look like, and so forth. And then that will be the time for us to move out in terms of looking at the monetization.
But the problem is, Mr. Dejoy, and I apologize for interrupting, but my time is limited, as you well know, that in Norwalk, they are in the process of redeveloping their downtowns now, in real time.
But Senator, that's
In
everywhere.
Milford, they are redeveloping a downtown. They want to provide you with reasonable alternatives for the postal property if it ever is going to be used. In Litchfield, I mean, I could go through a number of towns where in real time right now, there are businesses and taxpayer interests, and your customers are at stake. Why can't we move on some of these properties right away rather than the post office, in effect, with all due respect, stonewalling the people of Connecticut?
I don't know that we are, I do believe that we need to and have started a process to engage. I just was with a couple of congressmen in their towns looking at some of these projects. I do think we need to get into a better dialogue, more meaningful dialogue with local constituents, quicker in terms of the decisions that we need to make and the reasons why we can't relinquish or can relinquish the property. I think we need to get better at that. Doesn't change the answer, in many cases, because we do need many of these properties. So I don't know. I mean, do you want me to look into this further?
Well, you promised to look into it
And
in
we gave
April.
you an answer.
And you gave me an answer to refer to a September 2023 letter, which frankly I find insulting.
Well, why do you find it insulting? If we feel we need
Because
the, if
what
we need,
you
if we
say
need the
is
property, we need the property.
absolutely untrue, that it is used in the peak holiday season. And if anybody
So
paid attention, gave it the slightest care, were
that's not true, because Senator, back when I got here, we added like 1,000 locations during peak, right, to do deliveries. Because of some of the changes that we have made in our operational processes, that is coming down. That might have been one. We ran a lot of additional operations during the peak season that were crazy and costly and deteriorated service. So in our process, I'm emptying buildings all over the country. But this is a process. I can't just...
Well, the process seems to be never-ending.
Exactly.
And the lack of an end means the post office, the United States Postal Service, is deprived of revenue that it needs, and it means insulting the people of the United States who have an interest, your customers, not only in that revenue, but also in the most effective use of property that belongs to the United States Postal Service.
Senator,
So I welcome your willingness to come visit.
I'll come. But if I give up a bill, I get booted out of a retail center where I'm paying, let's say, $300,000 a year. You know what the price of that is for me to go someplace else today? Like $3 million a year. So I have to be careful with what we do with this real estate. There's significant increases in value and also a whole cartel of opportunists that we have dealt with over the years at the Postal Service with regard to these centers. So that property in a downtown, if you want a post office or a postal service, we are going through making.
Are you aware that the post office was moved out of Ridgefield? The office is no longer there. I would suggest that you really look into, as you promised you would do, the situation there personally. Maybe ask Mr. Slusher to do an advance visit so that you can be prepared when you come with me. And I appreciate your willingness to do so. But time is not on our side when it comes to those small businesses, whether it's in Ridgefield or the interests of towns, Milford, Norwalk, Litchfield, East Hartford, where the property interests are not used properly. I apologize for going over my time, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Rosen, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing. I do want to say that I'm very concerned, Postmaster, about your dismissal or lack of consideration of doing specific analysis in areas of concern regarding our mail delivery and our postal assets. And I might remind you, as I follow the distinguished senator from Connecticut, that today, that this body has oversight responsibility, and we do expect timely collaboration in these important issues that affect each and every one of our constituents and our communities and our state's economics. So I'm going to move on, Mr. Dejoy. The last time you testified before this committee, we discussed my concerns for your proposal for the Reno Processing and Distribution Center. The proposal, as originally crafted, could have led to significant delays in mail delivery. While I appreciate that after months of pushing, USPS finally responded to my calls to keep in-state mail letter processing in Reno, I do remain concerned about the overall implementation of your Delivering for America plan. According to the USPS online performance dashboard, while the standard for receiving and delivering mail in Reno is 2 days, USPS is currently averaging 3 to 4 days in certain zip codes in Reno. And so, can you speak specifically to Reno, if you may, what the USPS is currently doing to get our delivery times down in northern Nevada to the 2-day standard, and when we might expect that?
Yeah. So right now, of course, and I don't know specifically to Reno, but I believe Reno area, all of, I don't want to even say Nevada. Is it?
And if you come here, could you please learn to say Nevada properly? It is kind of respectful. I appreciate that.
No disrespect intended, and
Do you say Illinois if you go to talk to the senator
why are you
from
making
Illinois?
fun of me?
Well, it is a matter of respect. You've been through this body
Maybe
multiple
that's the way I
times.
speak. Why are you making fun of me?
I am not making fun
You
of
are
you, sir.
making fun of me.
I would like to see the respect due to my state of Nevada, which is
Likewise.
experiencing problems in their mail delivery service. When can we expect mail delivery back down to the 2-day standard?
50% of market-dominant mail and packages gets delivered a day in advance. We're at about 85% on time, 95% a day later. We're going to be in that condition for probably the next 8 to 12 months. Okay, when I expect that all mail, through the system reaches its intended. 4 days. The average time is 2.8 days across the nation for mail to be delivered. So.
Thank you. I'd like to move on and talk about the treacherous conditions on the Donner Pass on I-80, which we did speak about also last time. It is the only way to get from Reno to Sacramento. And so a path that you had in your original plan to redistribute mail processing from Reno would have relied on travel, for mail to travel out of Nevada and then, of course, back again. As I mentioned at that time, Donner Pass is some of the most extreme weather in the United States, with over 33 feet of snow annually. And just a few days ago, Donner Pass again was closed due to heavy snowfall. So you said you didn't have the data last time. Do you have any data that you could share with us today on how the weather conditions in Donner Pass may have been affecting the Postal Service? As we know, it's closed on over an average of a month a year during various times due to wildfire, snow, and high winds. Since you testified in April, and would you be willing to provide me that information if you don't have it here today and how it impacts our service?
Well, we were speaking about that with regard to the collection mail, the turnaround mail that was going back into the Reno area. I made a trip out to Reno, actually, to look at the plant and the operation. And for a variety of reasons, we took an alternative course. So the turnaround mail will not go through the Donner Pass, will stay local. Mail going out to the rest of the nation will go through the Donner Pass or whatever other direction that we have when it is closed. We're well aware that it is closed, and we have alternate types of arrangements through our transportation, to move to the Sacramento, where the main outgoing processing plant is going to be. I don't have any other specifics that I can get our routings from transportation and show you what we do when it's closed. I can have that sent to you.
Thank you. Well, I want to talk a little bit about regional transportation optimization, because in October you submitted a request for an advisory opinion from the Postal Regulatory Commission in which you proposed a series of operational changes. One such change is your regional transportation optimization. I'm going to refer to it as RTO. Under this proposal, mail collected at post offices in zip codes more than 50 miles away from the nearest regional processing center and distribution would have their morning and afternoon drop-off and pick-up activities consolidated into a single route. With the Postal Service already failing to meet many of its performance goals, I am concerned you want to cut the volume of routes. Senator Hassan, I think, is concerned about the same thing. And this proposal really unfairly impacts our rural mailers, especially in receipt of their Social Security checks, their medications, and some of those. And so despite concerns that I know many of us have shared with you, you've decided to move forward with I believe is a misguided proposal and citing a yet-to-be-proven gains in efficiency along the later legs of delivery. So have you conducted an analysis that conclusively proves that any delays in mail originating in rural areas will be mitigated by the subsequent gains in efficiency, or is this merely conjecture?
We have done extensive analysis on the total operational changes that we are presenting and the cost savings. First off, delivery into these areas will be enhanced because most mail, almost 90% of mail packages originates within a 50-mile radius, and nothing is changing to the delivery. So that will happen. The collection, the most that a collection, a single piece mail, somebody mailing a letter, the most that it'll be affected is 1 day allocated across 5 days. It'll still be no longer than 5 days to get to the furthest part in the nation. In your case.
And you have data, you have a report to support this.
It's
so
all
if you-
filed with
if-
the Postal Regulatory Commission.
Thank you. I want to just quickly ask this last question. We have contingency plans. We have bad weather across our nation many different times of the year. And of course, I'm concerned about our particularly bad weather up in northern Nevada along the I-80 route. Do you have contingency plans in place if routes like ours in Reno, subjected to the RTO initiative, become impassable? And I'm not the only person that may have roads that are impassable. I'm sure if you speak with, the chairman, he'll tell you about roads that are impassable in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and you could probably go after state to state. So do you have a contingency plan in place due to weather conditions?
We have alternate routes and actions that we take. We've been delivering mail for 250 years. We have alternate actions that we take with every disaster, road closure, hurricane, and so forth. Does it get it there the same time? That depends on the consequence of the event we're talking about. But we do have methodologies that we deploy readily, to make sure that the mail gets delivered and collected.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Ossoff, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Postmaster General, prior to your efforts to implement Delivering for America and move to the Palmetto facility in Georgia, on-time delivery for first-class mail in North Georgia was over 90%, correct?
Not so.
Not so? What was on-time first-class mail delivery in Georgia prior to the changes that you implemented at Palmetto?
So Atlanta was always in the bottom 20% of our service standard across the nation.
Now, my question is, what percentage of
I don't
first-class
remember.
mail?
It's probably in the low 80s. A single-piece first-class mail was definitely in the low 80s.
In the midst of the changes that you implemented mid-spring, that declined to 36%, correct?
We've been through this. Yes, it has.
We've been through this. Well, we're going through it again.
Okay, let's go.
On-time delivery of first-class mail in Metro Atlanta and North Georgia, late spring, was 36%, correct?
That is correct.
You said at the hearing in April that we would be, quote, where we need to be in about 60 days, correct?
I believe so. Yep.
It's been 233 days. Sound right?
I don't
It's
know.
been 233 days. On-time delivery of first-class mail in Metro Atlanta and North Georgia is now at 75%, correct? Are we where we need to be?
Where we're going to be for a little bit, yes.
Are we where we need to be?
Where we're going to be.
It's a simple question. Do you believe that 75%
think for right now, with
on-time delivery
transitions
of
that we're
mail in
doing,
North Georgia is where we need to be?
50% of first-class mail in Georgia gets delivered a day in advance. We're in the 75 to low 80s on time, and 90% is the day after. While we're doing our transitions, okay, that's where we're going to be. That's one of the reasons why we have other types of service-related issues that are...
Yeah, my time is limited. Let me assure you that for my constituents in Georgia, the mail being delivered on time, 75% of the time, is not where we need to be. When you said 233 days ago that we would be where we need to be in 60 days.
Yeah.
Delivering for America plan projected positive net income for USPS starting in FY23. Is that right?
That's correct.
In FY23, you had a $6.5 billion loss, correct? In FY24, you had a $9.5 billion loss, correct?
Correct.
You had projected for FY24 a $1.7 billion gain, correct?
I don't remember.
Yeah, that's correct. Would you say that your tenure has been a success?
I would say that the 10-year plan has not reached what the plan said it would be, but I do believe.
Sorry,
it's a
not your
success.
10-year plan, your tenure. Has your tenure as Postmaster General been a success?
Senator, I know how you feel about me. You've been quite public, okay? So I'm not going to, debate that you think I'm a failure. Fine, I don't.
It's not about how I feel about you,
It is.
Postmaster General. It's about whether or not seniors in Georgia are receiving prescriptions. It's the stacks of boxes of
Well, it's
mail
not-
from courts that never arrived
Well,
to
that's
their
not happening
destination.
now.
It's the
That's
small
not happening now.
businesses who are not able to get products to market
package
and who are,
delivery.
this is my time, Postmaster General. You're here under oath before the U.S. Senate.
I know where I am.
It's small businesses who can't operate. It's death notices not delivered to family members. And you're sitting here trying to explain that 75% on-time delivery is a success. And it's not. It's not about how I feel about you, Postmaster General. It's how my constituents are being served by the United States Postal Service. Let me ask you a question about the Palmetto facility in Georgia. Have there been any deaths in the Palmetto facility in the last year?
Any deaths?
Deaths.
I have a lot of events throughout the course of the year. I don't remember specific. I have a lot of deaths throughout the course of the year. I don't remember specifically Palmetto. No.
How many deaths of personnel on the job would you say you've had nationwide in the last year?
We probably see 10 in the course of the year.
Well, you had a death in the Palmetto facility last year. Will you provide my office and this committee with all materials relevant to that death?
Absolutely.
When will on-time mail delivery be restored to the level prior to you trying to make these changes for my constituents in Georgia? You said in April we'd be where we need to be in 60 days.
Well, first of all, I disagree with the premise because the service is probably at the level of service where you were before I started these changes, right?
We're not.
Yes, we are.
I've got the numbers in front of me. We're not.
I don't know what numbers you got. But
I've got your on-time delivery statistics.
But
You're
you-
not where you were before you tried to make this change in Georgia. You're at 75% on-time delivery in Georgia. So when will you
We
be?
started, you said the Delivering for America plan. When we started the Delivering for America plan, service in Georgia was terrible. Aspects of the Delivering for America plan brought that service up. We were close to the 90s across the board. That was part of the Delivering for America plan. When we opened the new plant is when we had our issues. Service went down, and we're recovering from it now. And it's part of, when we get to where we want to be, it's going to be part of the whole broad filing that we have with the PRC right now, where some of the service business rules that are 30 years old that should have been changed are affecting how we measure service. So there's a bunch of other things that need to come together to get the service where it is. In all, service in Georgia is within less than 3 days, people get all their mail packages and everything, right? And that will be what, that will be the target, what we're trying to shoot
You
for.
just lowered your targets for next year, correct?
I lowered the targets for next year to put that, what I just said, out into the public, that this is what it's going to look like.
You lowered your targets for next year so you could meet your targets.
So I can make the changes that we need to make to provide a viable United States Postal Service.
Well, Postmaster General, you're not meeting your financial targets. You're hemorrhaging cash when you said you'd be making money. Delivery in Georgia has been abysmal this year. You have not recovered, as you said you would. You need to do better for my constituents in Georgia.
Yes, sir.
Senator Hawley, I recognize for your questions, and thank you for deferring to some of our colleagues here. That was very kind.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Dejoy, good to see you. Let me ask you about the regional transportation optimization plan. A couple of my colleagues had questions about this. Now, and maybe you can clear up some things for me. My understanding is that this plan will eliminate end-of-day collection at post offices that are located more than 50 miles from a hub. Is that basically correct?
What? I'm sorry.
Eliminate end-of-day collection from post offices that are located more than 50 miles from a hub. Is that basically right?
Most likely, in most places.
Okay. Could you speak into your microphone, Mr. Dejoy, a little bit there? That way we can hear each other better. Great. So, okay. It's going to eliminate end-of-day collection at most post offices located more than 50 miles from one of the hubs. Now, in Missouri, we've got 926 post offices. 754 of them are more than 50 miles from a hub. And that accounts for 50% of my state's population. And I understand that under your own agency's projections, 68% of rural single-piece first-class mail will get downgraded under this plan. That's going to be half my state. Can you walk me through that?
Yeah. So I would have to look at what we're saying in terms of local cancellation, because I think in Missouri we decided to keep another local cancellation plan, but it'll be one or two plans. So to some certain extent, you're right that there's a bunch of offices that are outside the, that would get the, what we say is the plus 1 day, where we would send a truck out when we deliver mail and take it back, which is an obvious cure for an inefficient process. We will then accelerate within the reach of the plant that it goes to. We will accelerate through the system, so we'll pick up time there, and across the country we'll pick up time because we will deploy operating practices that get us on the road about 4 hours earlier, right? So that's going to get us further. With regard to the impact, the 68%, it's not that much. It's single-piece mail outbound only. So all mail, with 88% of mail originates from within a 50-mile radius, and all that delivery will be picked up by that 4-hour process moving through the system. So all delivery into all your constituents everywhere will be better in terms of the delivery side. It's only the outbound collections that come and go through this, that get the extra day, that within the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 day span that we have right now, okay, a 2 day may go to 3 day, a 3 day may go to 4 day, a 4 day may go to 5 day, but nothing's going beyond 5 days. And that's going to save, we have tens of thousands of trucks running around with nothing in them. Right, and that is a big reason, to make the change. So I think, within, on a single piece mail, and I'm not diminishing its importance, but somebody mailing a letter to, a card or something like that may get a day later within the 5 day constraint.
Yeah, my concern is, thank you for confirming that. My concern is that that's going to affect half of my state, 754 of my state's post offices. This is on top of downgrades that happened in late 2021. I mean, this is, as you can understand, I'm sure, this is why the Missouri Farm Bureau has written to you opposing this. All of my rural electric cooperatives are opposed to this. This is disproportionate impact on rural folks. I understand that some urban areas will also experience downgrades, but to them, your own estimates say it'll be a third of their volume. It's 2/3, more than 2/3 of the rural volume. I mean, why the disproportionate impact on rural folks?
It actually has more of an impact on urban areas. The impact is like 60% urban, 40% rural. Urban areas have sprouted up. Postal system was built 30s and 40s, and we have different, the geography has greatly changed. So there are urban areas. I need to get cost out. And this is extremely, I don't believe that this is a punitive way. We focus on delivery. We're delivering to 167 million delivery points every day. We set the constraints around the 5-day service. It only affects single piece, so all their deliveries, everything that's going to them is going to be timely. The local cancellation reach, I can get back to you as to what that reach is going to be from the 1 or 2 plants, so that'll take that out of the delivery, out of the impact zone. But at the end of the day, this is a change we need to make to get the cost out. We're chasing $3.7 billion. And this is all about rural America, Senator. If we,
Well, you're reducing the deliveries you're reducing the volume to rural America. I mean, you're slowing it down. They're getting the downgrades. 68% of their mail is going to get downgraded.
significantly more volume gets delivered to people in rural America, in every place, than they actually mail out. Significant. So it's disproportional inbound than outbound.
But you don't dispute the fact that 68% of their single-piece first-class mail is going to get downgraded. You just told me that it would. It get downgraded. And listen, I think I understand you. You're trying to cut costs. I'm just telling you. I understand your position, Mr. Dejoy, but I need you to understand mine. I represent a state that's majority rural. 754 of my 950 and my 926 post offices are going to experience additional delays. This is on top of the fact that in the Kansas-Missouri district, you're hitting a 72% on-time delivery standard that's well beneath your own target. I mean, I'm just telling you that in my state, they're very frustrated. And when you have, the Farm Bureau represents 157,000 Missouri farm families, and they look at your plan and they say, what in the world? We're going to get the shaft here, just to be honest with you. I'm just telling you the facts. This is how, in my state, this is how it seems.
So I think the alternatives are that we get some significant government funding, because we were going to run out of cash when I got here. We're going to run out of cash. I think we've worked very, very hard to find a way. You see, I try and do one single move in efficiency, and there is no enjoyable answer for anybody here. We think this is a way that continues to get good, reliable. So it is a change. It is a change that should have been made 20 years ago, right? So there's a big, heavy lift here because nothing's been done for 20 years. And, the impacts are not unfelt. I understand that. It's scary to many people. I understand that too. But I think, we have made a determination that which is what our role is, to try and define and evolve as to what the service is. And we are looking at improving inbound service significantly, keeping costs affordable, keeping the Postal Service alive. Yes, there will be an impact on some collection, single-piece mail.
You've asked the Postal Regulatory Commission, I think, for an advisory opinion on this. If they issue a negative opinion, will you stop moving forward with the implementation of this plan?
So we will evaluate their everything that they say and take it, seriously and make adjustments. They had their testimony yesterday. We had our testimony yesterday. They started with negative connotations on the plan, which makes me question their understanding of what the condition that we're in and the things we need to do. But we will take, like every input that we get, we take it, we will take it seriously and make adjustments. But I think there's an overwhelming propensity for us to move forward, and we should expect that.
Well, I want you to know, and I want you to expect that I hate this plan, and I'm going to do everything I can to kill it. I'm going to try to protect every delivery to the state of Missouri, to my rural areas, and I just want you to know, so that we're on the same page, I want you to know I'm going to go to the mat on this, and I'm going to work with everybody I can across this dais to protect delivery to rural America. And if I have to go down with the ship, I'll go down with the ship, but I'm going to do everything I can to kill it.
Yeah, you won't go down with the ship. If you're successful, the Postal Service will go down.
No, if I'm successful, rural America will get its mail delivered on time, which it's currently not, and urban areas will get their mail delivered on time, which is currently not.
gonna
And we just,
Senator?
who's paying for it? The taxpayers who've been paying for it all along. We just in 2021 gave you a bill that you wanted, Mr. Dejoy, that reduced your liabilities by tens of billions of dollars. And listen, I've been nice to you up until now. But frankly, I'm a little tired of this. We have waited and we have waited and we have waited for better delivery. I have written you letters like I can't count, talking about the delivery in the Kansas City area, which is appalling, talking about the delivery to rural area. We've got the Bering Post Office, which has been completely decimated for 2 solid years, that has now been rebuilt by a private party that your agency still has not cleared and opened. And yeah, I'm not happy about it. And I've been nice to you today and up until now, but you've exhausted my patience on this. And I just want you to know it, because I represent a state whose patience is exhausted. So there, I've leveled with you now. I think we understand each other. But I want to see service to my state and the rural areas of my state preserved. And in the urban areas, I want to see it get better and meet the standard. And I want the Bering Post Office rebuilt and opened like you promised me it would be when we were here in April, and it still isn't as we sit here in December. So that's my piece. That's where we are, just so we understand each other. And I look forward to working with you going forward.
Yeah, I understand you. I don't think you understand me.
Senator Marshall? Senator Marshall, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Chairman, and welcome, Postmaster General. Certainly understand you have an impossible job, and I hope I have time to ask you why is it impossible. But I want to start, we asked some folks back home, if you could be in front of the Postmaster General, what questions would they ask you? So this first one is from Mike from Topeka, and Stacy from Marysville had the same question. What is justifying the consistent price increases with no change or improvement in delivery time or service?
Senator, we had a defective pricing model for 20 years. Mail volume cut in half, and we were not allowed to raise our prices to accommodate that. The basic division that would have told anybody that we needed to have a significant increase in price. Also, during the time period that I've been here and raising prices, we've had 20% inflation. So under any circumstance, okay, the price, the prices that we have, the only thing we've raised our prices on have been mostly the inflation, right? And that is the case. The service was deteriorating when I walked in the door. It had been bad. It was getting worse, and we are trying. And the trajectory has to be stabilized before we start getting better.
Thank you. I'll go to the next question. This one's from Dana from El Dorado. A lot of folks in rural Kansas do not get their mail in a timely manner. First-class mail used to get anywhere in the United States in 2 to 3 days. What changed?
The standard.
The standard.
It's 5 days now.
The standard is 5.
It's 2 to
Why?
5,
So why was the standard changed?
Because the operational cost because mail volume had declined 50%, over 50%. We were flying, we spent $3.5 billion flying mail around the country to meet the 3-day standard when I got here, and we're running 50,000 trucks a day empty, right? So I don't own planes. We canceled those contracts that were flying all the stuff. We put everything on truck, and that's our on a ground service. And that is our big initiative now.
Has that project been successful?
Yes, we've taken $1.5 billion out of our transportation budget. We got service up to in the 90s across the board until we started making these physical distribution changes,
Okay.
which
All
are painful.
Okay, next, we sent a poll out to over 400,000 Kansans this week. Everybody was not a push poll, and over half of the Kansans in their said their mail delivery services are unreliable. So over half of Kansans said the mail delivery services are unreliable, and nearly 70% said they have personally experienced delays in the past year. How do you measure success? Certainly you're not going to call that success, I would assume.
No, we have issues in Kansas. We have issues in Kansas. I'm aware of the service issues in Kansas. And we are working on the plant there is old. It's a 3-story building. There are other operational issues that we have in Kansas, and I am working a strategy specifically to enhance the service in Kansas. That is not a result of anything in the plan, right? It's a result of operational issues that we have in Kansas, and I recognize it's there, and we're going to fix it.
So how would you measure success?
In Kansas?
I mean, I assume there's some metric that says the average number of days. Are you meeting the 5-day standard, I guess? How do you follow that?
I still think when you look at Kansas, 50% of market-dominant mail and packages get to where they're supposed to be a day in advance of a standard. We have, in your case, you said 77, so we might be 77% on time, but the next day, we're within 90, we're in the 90s. Right now, with all the transitions of the traffic coming in and out that we need to make, I think that is part of the consequence of the damage that has been done to the organization over the past 2 decades.
Okay, I need my next question. Postmaster General, the city of Winchester, Kansas has been without a post office building since October 2020. City officials have been provided with a draft lease from the USPS, but have not received a signed, finalized lease allowing them to begin constructing a new building. Can I get your commitment today that a finalized lease will be returned to the city of Winchester by the end of this year?
By the end of this year? I can check. I know that's in process. I'll check out what the timing.
What's a reasonable time then if it's not by the end of this year?
Sure, I will, let me get back to you. I'll go check on that when we get back to the office. I am trying to accelerate all our leasing practices. It is a laborious.
It's Winchester, Kansas, okay.
Yeah.
I think you kind of alluded to this audit by the Inspector General in the Kansas City region. What's getting better there? Tell me just, what's improving? How are you measuring that? Can we expect improvement in 6 months, in 3 years?
I think in the coming year, we should have, in the coming year, we should have, Kansas is in the middle of the country. Most of the service is 3-day service in and out, in and out of the country. And that's a tough service lane for us now because we're trying to stretch the transportation dollar and fill our trucks. So it is cumbersome when we're looking at some new routings and some new transportation modes that I think over the next 6 months we will start to see them take shape.
Okay.
But I still, we are. When I got here, there was the tail of the mail. If it didn't get there on time, it disappeared for 10 days. We are really focused on this window of, within 3 days,
Okay. Okay.
measuring that.
I'm going to close with this question, Postmaster General. Explain to me where the resistance is. I think you're sincere. I think you want to fix the post office. I don't know that I could fix the post office. Besides throwing money at it, where's the resistance? I just feel like when I can see the strain in your voice that you want to fix this, you came in here, you want to. Who's the resistance to fixing this problem?
I think there's a romance with an organization that long ago lost its ability to do the service that everybody expected. And that is what's at the issue here, right? It was obvious in the past, we let it go. Where there was a significant resistance to I have calls with congressmen, senators that even understand my plan. They say, just not in my district, not here, not there, right? I have my own people, 640,000 people that need to learn how to operate like FedEx and UPS. That's the only way we survive.
So that sounds like resistance to me.
It's not resistance, it's.
So FedEx can do it, but you guys can't.
It would have been easier for me to build a new postal service than to transition this one, because we're also delivering 400 million pieces of mail and packages a day, right? 400 million. Pretty reliable if you say within 3 days, pretty reliable. If you tie all the other regiments that we have, right? We have a postal regulatory organization, a regulator that doesn't understand modern day logistics and productivity. and aggregation, all right? So we have a laborious process. We have significant unfunded mandates that are given upon us by this, this Congress. All right, I can go on, sir.
Thank you. Postmaster General Dejoy, thank you for being here today. As you heard, members of our committee have lots of questions, and we appreciate you being here to answer those questions as we continue to exercise our oversight role as a committee. The record for this hearing will remain open for 15 days until 5 p.m. on December 19th, 2024 for the submission of statements and questions for the record. This hearing is now adjourned.
Thank you.